The fourth issue centers on the inequities of student learning spaces that were used in lieu of the typical classroom setting. So we know that some students had learning spaces in their bedrooms, desks in the rooms, or there were designated spaces inside the home, makeshift learning spaces, right? But sadly, for some, there were no learning spaces. In 2019, the National Center on Family Homelessness reported that 2.5 million children in America were homeless. That represents roughly 1 in every 30 children in the U.S. And of the 2.5 million, 1.3 million of those were school age. And the most recent data from North Carolina indicates that close to 30,000 students enrolled in grades K through 12 are homeless. And of those, 70% reported some type of disability, while 30% were identified as having limited English proficiency. Also, we know that other students live in very unstable situations that aren't conducive to learning. That also, this idea of, unstable spaces or homelessness also is confounded with things like, or relates well to the digital divide issue, the lack of access to nutrition, and often the lack of special education services, and especially as we think about the number of homeless students who have disabilities. The final negative educational impact of COVID-19 pertains to what is referred to in education as the summer slide. And the summer slide basically is just the phrase used to describe the slide backward or the regression that many children make in reading and math skills over the summer months. And some of the earliest work related to the summer slide suggested that the summer slide really leads to declines of up to 2 to 3 months of learning over the summer. And educational researchers have further described this as like the Faucet Theory to provide a hypothesis as to why the summer slide hits lower income children much harder. And here's what the Faucet Theory proposes. It's that the resource faucet is on for all students during the school year, which enables all students, to make learning gains. But over the summer, the flow of resources slows for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, but doesn't slow at all for students from advantaged backgrounds. Students from higher income homes tend to continue to have access to financial and human capital resources. Think about all the wonderful educational camps. Many of them are very expensive, or those wonderful family vacations that are educational in nature that lots of students take over the summer. Those things facilitate learning. But now, as a result of the pandemic, what has traditionally been called the summer slide is now being referred to as the COVID slide, because it encompasses now the spring into the summer months. So this COVID learning loss reflects the gaps in academic growth due to the disruptions of learning following the shelter-in-place orders, compared to, what students would have achieved in a regular classroom setting, even with, the online learning. So what we have now is a combination of summer learning loss with the COVID learning loss. And so as teachers, we already know that the summer months really make for a rocky transition back in the fall. It's can be a very rocky transition back into the classroom in the fall. And students often will have some difficulty gaining momentum at the beginning of the school year. But now this COVID learning loss is just adding to this year's deterioration of the academic skills during the summer months. And we're especially concerned about the students from low-income homes. So I finished presenting all of the bad news, and there was a lot of it. So we know that COVID has really compounded the educational inequities. Talked about the digital divide, the lack of access to good nutrition and support services and learning spaces. And lastly, we looked at the summer slide. I would like to conclude this discussion by leaving you with a final thought. When millions of children aren't given what they need to learn, our whole society misses out on the potential of entire generations whose minds, unique talents, and visions for a better future are never realized. As the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. so famously said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So thanks for working with me through this discussion of this yucky, this negative stuff, but stay tuned because we are now going to focus on the positive.